What is truth in this sea of deception? We have to ask ourselves, who do we trust?
This is part 2 of our conversation about truth, discernment, deception, and how people hold on to truth in a world full of noise.
Because one of the comments we received asked something powerful. How do we find discernment in a world where information itself feels manipulated? This is Nightwave Radio, No Chaser. I'm Jason J. Knight.
And with me, my brother and co-host, Flip Diesel, from your favorite podcast. How do we find discernment in a world where information itself feels manipulated?
And honestly, that question stayed with me. Because I spent 2 years living in South Korea. And while I was there, I had a bicycle. And one of the things I used to do was ride along parts of the DMZ. Now most people only know Korea from television, headlines, politics, documentaries, but when you physically live somewhere, you start seeing layers, because once you move away from the commercial side of South Korea, away from the bright lights and city energy, you start seeing older parts of Korea, smaller homes, rural areas, places that feel untouched by modern luxury. And there were moments riding near border regions where you could literally feel tension in the air. One story being told on this side, another story being told on the other side. And it taught me something important. What we see from far away and what people actually live are not always the same thing.
And that's dangerous now, because everybody think information equals truth. Jason.
Exactly. We live in a time where people can access more information than any generation before them and still not know what's real. And one thing South Korea taught me was this: you cannot control everything. You can't spend your entire life living in fear of what might happen. Because if you live every day terrified, somebody's going to attack you, somebody's going to take your land, somebody's going to destroy your future, then eventually you stop living. You stop loving. Your children stop growing in peace. And that fear starts becoming its own prison. Now I know that still doesn't fully answer the North Korea question, because people ask,
how can entire populations believe something that isn't true?
And honestly, history shows us this has happened many times before, not just in governments, but in cultures, religions, communities, even families. Sometimes people inherit beliefs long before they ever question them. But here's the part that stayed with me. Even in systems built on control,
there are always people quietly praying, quietly hoping, quietly resisting, and I believe that matters more than people realize, because I believe there are believers in South Korea praying for North Korea every single day, praying for people they may never meet, praying that one day truth reaches through the walls.
And that reminds me of Elijah. When Elijah felt overwhelmed, felt isolated, felt like truth itself was disappearing, and God reminded him there were still people who had not bowed. Still people holding on to truth quietly. Still people carrying the remedy
inside them. So basically, truth don't always disappear loud. Sometimes it survives underground.
Exactly. And I think people forget that. Because God has always worked through remnants, small groups, quiet people, unexpected places. And honestly, I don't think this conversation is only about North Korea. I think it's about humanity. Because every generation wrestles with deception in different forms. Propaganda, fear, pride, power, comfort, false certainty. And eventually, people start trusting systems more than discernment.
That's dangerous. Now listen, I I know people hear leaders like Kim Jong-un and think, how could someone become viewed almost like a god?
Power has always tried to replace truth. That's not new. Kings, empires, governments, movements, human beings have always been vulnerable to worshiping power when fear controls the environment.
But I also believe this: no human being is beyond the reach of God.
And maybe that sounds naive to some people. But Saul was once hunting David. Then later, God touched him, and his entire direction changed. So I believe hearts can change, even powerful ones, even dangerous ones, even leaders. But I also think something else is true. Systems built on fear do not like awakened people.
Because once people begin seeing clearly, control becomes harder.
And throughout history, people who stood up first
Were often struck down first. That's why discernment matters. Not paranoia, not fear. Discernment.
Because if fear controls you, then deception already won. And maybe the goal isn't knowing every hidden truth on earth. Maybe the goal is staying anchored enough spiritually that lies stop controlling your direction.
This is Night Wave Radio.
No chaser, I'm Jason J. Knight. Stay awake
Stay anchored, keep standing, and we'll see
And
you
we'll see
on
you
the next broadcast.
on the next broadcast.
One way we push back against that famine is simple and small. Open the Word, ask the Spirit to speak, and actually listen.
This is Nightwave Radio, broadcasting from the edge of the court. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who needs a little courage tonight, and we'll see you on the next broadcast.